Welcome to Terry TV. So glad that you have tuned in. These episodes, I'm telling you, just amazing. We're here to really help you learn so much about your marketing, about your business, about your sales, and even about your mindset and your attitude. So I'm going to tell you about how I met the next guest, and I don't think he even knows. I kind of find people on social media that have really interesting messages, and I start to stalk them. I follow them, I pay attention to what they're offering and what they're really saying on Facebook. And this person caught my attention. First of all, he has a word that I'm definitely one of them, so I was really attracted to the word, and I'll give it to you in a moment. Secondly, I really liked his message, and I really liked his tribe, and I liked what he had to say on Facebook and how conscious he is. So this is my new friend. His name is Tad Hargrave, and Tad is a hippie, that's the word I resonate with here, who developed a knack for marketing and then sort of learned how to be a hippie again. I love that. Despite years in the nonprofit and in the activist world, he finally had to admit that he was a marketing nerd, and in the end he became a marketing coach for hippies. And I don't know if that's because he couldn't stand seeing his hippie friends struggling and he wanted them to be able to promote their amazing green and holistic projects, or maybe because he just couldn't keep that 9-to-5 job. I don't really know. Tad, welcome to Terry TV.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. You know, I seriously mean this. I was so attracted to the messages that you have to say on Facebook, and they're so important and they're so conscious. And I would go to your page, not a lot of pages I visit every day, and I'd go to your page just to see what is it you're saying, what is the stand you're taking. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So, you know, people get very concerned about the word marketing and very confused about the word marketing. Tell me just how you feel about marketing and the whole concept.
Well, I mean, I suppose I feel like most people feel, I grew up in the same culture, and marketing gets used in a way that it just doesn't feel good for anybody. It doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of it. Most of us would, if given the choice, would avoid a chance to be marketed to. And having been in marketing, especially when I started, it often feels bad to be on the delivering end of it. You pretend it doesn't, but then at night it's hard to sleep. You don't like the way you've treated people, and sometimes you'll get feedback that lets you know that it didn't feel good for them. So yeah, I suppose I feel the same way about it, and which is what's had me be curious about how do we do marketing in a way that's going to feel good for the person receiving it, but also feel good for the person delivering it.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I had to market my first business. I had no idea how to market it, and I just did what felt right, and I didn't follow any of the things in books because it felt wrong, and I was able to build a business that way. And then in my second business, I learned all of this marketing and built that business in the beginning with the traditional marketing and really didn't feel good about it. So I had to unlearn it to do it in a way that feels more authentic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm curious what it was for you that didn't feel good about the stuff that you learned.
Oh, it's a great question. It felt manipulative. Even the words, the language, the messaging, it felt like I was manipulating people instead of just, I like to view it this way. If I make great lemonade and you come to my door, I'll say, hey, would you like some lemonade? That feels authentic, not, oh, if I say these 10 power words, I have a better chance of getting you to say yes.
Yeah. I think this is the whole thing, is that the goal, why marketing feels good and why it feels bad really comes down to the goal of it. If the goal is to get people to say yes, to get the sale, it's always going to feel off. It's always going to feel inauthentic. If the goal is to get to the truth of whether it's a fit or not, it's going to feel great. And the irony is you can use a lot of the same tactics. You can use a lot of the same approaches. For example, in the coaching world, there are these strategy sessions, which are often just a covert sales call. And the general format of the call is, so where do you want to be? Where are you now? What's in the gap? Here's how I can help you.
Yeah.
And it's often done, the coaches are walking in already assuming they can help the person. So we're already just trying to get them to say yes to this place of working with us. And it's just, how do we do it? And so then you start to learn, what words do I say? What phrases do I say? And how do I use my body and nonverbal communication to increase the likelihood of the yes, rather than walking in actually not being sure, having no idea, and just having a human conversation to see, is this actually a fit for you right now?
Right. I love that you brought that up, because in the coaching industry, I remember when I went to coach training school, decades ago, there was this script, and I said, it doesn't feel right to me to use a script. I don't know what the outcome's going to be. So I decided to go in with no outcome other than listening and being present, hearing what someone's situation or problem was, and if I could help, offering some solutions, maybe not even my own, because maybe that's not what they needed. And it was very interesting. I was able to get 30 clients in 30 days, which was, kind of crazy. It's not the way I was expecting to build a business. And I think it's just because I wasn't doing those typical strategy sessions or consults that right now I think turn the market off.
Well, and it's interesting too, because, this whole thing of like, I don't want to use the script. And of course the response is usually, but it works better. This is more effective. But then there's this question of, A, is that true? And I would question that. But B, more effective at what? More effective at getting people to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I'll do in a lot of my online programs is when people, there'll be the long sales letter.
Yes.
And then, and just long because I think there's just a lot to say for a lot of these things. But then there's the button to click to pay, and then they pay and all that. But what I found was I was getting people writing me who'd signed up for a program, partway into the program, saying, I'm just realizing this isn't a fit for me. And so I'd say, okay, well, and anytime somebody asks for a refund or it's just like, okay, well, I trust you. Something was missing in my marketing. So, what should have been on the sales page or what shouldn't have been. I would get feedback and I would change it. But then I got to a point where my sales letters were actually really good. And people would write me and say, this program isn't a fit. I'm like, but it said this in the sales letter. It's like, well, I didn't realize I'd have to use Facebook. It says it 3 times that it's going to be based on it. So one of the things I started doing was when people click the buy now button, instead of it taking them just to the payment page, it would take them to a page I call the Are You Sure page. And at that page on the top, there'd be a video, just like a minute long, of me saying, hey, thanks so much for your interest in buying this product. My guess is if you're like me, you just skimmed that sales page. You didn't actually read it, which I understand. I do it too. But there's actually important stuff in it. And so I've taken the most important stuff in terms of figuring out if it's a fit, and I've pasted that below. And I'm going to ask that you actually go and read that in detail right now. And if at the end of that, you still feel like it's a fit, I'm so happy to have you in the program. And if not, I'll see you down the road somewhere. And it was interesting because when I was explaining this to some colleagues, they were like, well, sort of, have you done any testing or measure it? But I was like, testing for what? Mm-hmm. I know what they're saying. What they're saying is, probably accurately, that it's going to depress the response rate, the conversion rate is going to go down. So less effective at what? Less effective at getting people to say yes, but much more effective at getting the right people to say yes and filtering out the people who weren't going to be a fit anyways. And the response I got from people, one was people who it wasn't a fit for. Some of them realized, man, when I really looked at how much time was going to be required and all this, I'm about to go traveling, so I realized it wasn't a fit. So thank you so much. Mm-hmm. I look forward to working with you down the road. And then people who was a fit for, I get emails like, I was already excited about this program, but when I really read in and I saw how perfect it was for me, I'm like twice as excited.
That's awesome. I don't know anybody who does that, by the way. I really like that. Like it resonates completely. It's so authentic. It's so transparent. And I bet you have a lot less unhappy people and people requesting refunds.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's because, marketing fundamentally is driven by word of mouth at the end of the day. That's how it actually works.
Absolutely.
Most of why we buy things has to do with the word of mouth. That means, let's say, to a workshop, and you get 100 people, and you close the whole room, 100 people in the room, and you sell everybody. amazing, they would say. But let's say then that means 75% of the people are either kind of meh about it or it's not a fit. Mm-hmm. Well, then that means you're going to get this kind of terrible word of mouth about it. Mediocre to bad word of mouth. So you get this sort of downward spiral versus if in the pitch I say, here's the workshop, here's who it's for, here's who it's not for, here's what it is, here's what it isn't. And I'm kind of actively pushing away people who aren't a fit. I'll only get maybe 25% of the room, in that case, but they're all going to love it. They're all going to have such a great, and there's nobody there harshing the buzz of the group, which means better word of mouth. So it's actually a more sustainable approach.
This is brilliant. The things that I've loved about following you on Facebook and watching you on Facebook are coming out here, which is you're unconventional. You're willing to do things differently. You're willing to do things in a very transparent way. And I can also sense when someone has a tribe of people that is really attached to them and really appreciates each and every program you come out with. And I've been watching that for several months. One of your programs that caught my eye was on niching. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Spiral is the program, and it's just this fundamental thing. The first thing that people come to me with is the marketing feels gross. That's once they get comfortable with it, they're confronted with this little question of niche. And the way I define niche is, it comes from the French verb nicher, which means to make a nest. Mm-hmm. So your niche is kind of your role in the community, is the way I would define it. And I know for a lot of my colleagues, it's used synonymously with who and target market and chosen audience and ideal client and all that. That's a part of it. But fundamentally, it's your role in the marketplace that you want to be known for.
Right.
And so what that tells you actually is that you can't not have a niche because you're always going to be known for something. It just might be that you're known, there's some people, it's like, what's this person known for? I don't know. They've got a bunch of modalities. They're kind of the flaky, I don't know, they do Reiki and energy stuff. I don't know that kind, but that's a reputation.
Right.
Being known as the jack of all trades and it's not a bad reputation, but that's what it is. So the only question with the niche, it's not do you have one or not. Mm-hmm. The question is it working for you? Does it allow you to do the kind of work that you want to do and the way you want to do it with the people with whom you like to do it? That's it. And for most people, that hasn't kind of been set up in that way. So it's this fundamental thing because everything hinges on niche. Mm-hmm. When people are like, well, I want to get discovered or found. Well, by whom? And depending who those people are, it depends on the kind of hubs or influencers you want to connect with. And this niche is just it's the fundament of kind of everything.
I'm glad you're mentioning it. The several years into my consulting and coaching, all of a sudden I ended up with dentists. I started with one dentist and then all the way at 30, right? And one day I said, I'm not having fun. They're getting results, but this just isn't the kind of people that I have the same vibe for. And it was a difficult decision. I returned $88,000 worth of money for my infusion soft. And
wow.
Difficult. I just said, it's not an alignment, and there's other people who can serve them better. And then I just got real clear and said, I'm going to do what I love to do, and that's all I'm going to do. But I think we need to know that, because if we're not choosing and being selective, sometimes we have to just pay attention. Sometimes we choose the market, and sometimes the market chooses us. You know what you say that?
Yeah, I found that, when I first started, I really thought my niche was going to be local green retail businesses. But it turned out there weren't a ton of those, 10 years ago when I started. And then one day I just kind of looked around at my workshops and I was like, man, half these people are holistic practitioners. Mm-hmm. And I was like amazed that it had taken me because I started reflecting on the past couple of years. I was like, yeah, that's who's been coming. Well, once I noticed that, for a couple of years, I ran a workshop called Marketing 101 for Holistic Practitioners. And it was the easiest thing to fill, really satisfying. So, yeah, I agree. That's oftentimes I'll just have people stop and just say, well, look, who's already coming to you? And how would you break that into groups? And what do you notice? And almost always there's something that's very clear that they hadn't noticed before.
Exactly, exactly. Now, I want to get into another piece during our time together, the difference between cold, warm, and hot marketing.
Yeah. So, yeah, three different approaches or levels to marketing. So the cold level is basically you're approaching people as a stranger. They don't know your name. They're not glad you came. It's random business networking mixers where people just handing out cards. It's the I don't know, putting posters in random places, leaving handbills in random places. There's no relationship. It's cold calling. There's nothing there. You're a stranger, and so this is like 10 units of effort and 1 unit of reward. It just doesn't work very well. It ultimately will drain you. And what I realized one day is like, oh, this is what people think marketing is. When people think about marketing, they're thinking cold marketing. But there's other ways to do it. So the warm approach is, there's you trying to got a product or service. There's somebody who might want to buy it, but instead of going directly to them, cold with no relationship, there's like a third person, and that third person is what I would call a hub. So the hub is somebody who's already very well connected to and respected by this community. And so if you can build a relationship with this hub, they're going to introduce you not just to one person, but potentially dozens of people who will then want to connect with you. And so this is at least a 1 unit of effort to 1 unit of reward, at least, often better. But this at least becomes commensurate for the effort that you're putting in. And it's just understanding, okay, some people have already invested an inordinate amount of time and energy to build this trust and relationship with these people. And instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, much easier, so when I was in Ottawa, the first time I did a workshop there, I'd never been there. And yet, with like 3 hours of work, I filled 2 workshops with 60 people each, 2-day-long workshops.
Wow.
But it's because there was a woman in Ottawa, Heather Garrett, who runs a business called Planet Botanics, and she is very connected to that scene. And I got introduced to her by a friend. She checked out my website. She's like, I love this. My people need this. And she was the one that promoted it. And I said, I'll give you $25 per person who signs up. Shows up. She's like, great. So we just had that arrangement. And so I did very little work, and yet 2 sold out day-long workshops. So this type of thing, one of the things I'll tease people with during my workshops, I'll say, there's a form of marketing that is, when we're talking about marketing, we're talking about fundamentally, I think you've almost got to flip it. My friend Karina Gordon Barnes, she said, stop trying to find your ideal client, because your ideal client is already looking for you. And we spend so much time kind of being a searchlight in marketing, which people run away from, versus a lighthouse where people come and find us. And so understanding that people are out there with problems, they are looking for help and solutions, and they're, so your people are looking for you. There are people out there who are just like craving somebody who does work just the way you do it. So then the critical question becomes not how do I find them, as much as how do you make it easy for them to find you? And so this is, how do you lay down a path so that it's very well marked, that they could get to you. So you're not just a cabin in the woods where they have to grab a machete and hack through the underbrush to get to you, and use a compass and map but you make some really well laid out paths, but there's something you can add to any of these paths, which makes them work like 10 times better. And it feels better for you, feels better for them, doesn't even feel like marketing, and makes the marketplace better, which is this idea of hub marketing, if you engage in it well, or kind of partner marketing. And so that's the warm level, as you build relationship. The hot level is where you have become a hub. So you already have this relationship with a lot of the other hubs. Your niche is very well established. Everybody knows what you're about. So let's say you do craniosacral for migraines or something. Everyone in town knows. So, you got migraines? This is the person you talk to. They're the best. And so that is like a 1 unit of effort, 10 units of reward. It's at that point, you've gotten such a reputation, word of mouth, that business is just coming to you. It doesn't mean you can't hustle. It doesn't mean you can't do more warm marketing, or when you need to, the cold marketing to prime the pump. But fundamentally you've got it working for you. And so to me, this is the goals. We get to this hot level where you're like, the hub, like the hub of a wheel where all the spokes are connecting. You get there. So fundamentally, one of the things I tell people is stop doing the cold marketing just if you can, and start doing the warm marketing. Start figuring out what are the hubs. But again, the hubs, you can't figure out even what the hubs are until there's a niche. Until I know kind of what you do, how you do it, for whom you do it, It's impossible, because then what we're functionally saying is, what are the hubs for everybody? Where can I find people? Which doesn't work.
Doesn't work at all. I love this. I like the concept of hub marketing. I mean, I believe I do it, I don't know how consciously, but I believe I do it online and offline. So online, I've got certain Facebook groups that definitely I'm at the center of the hub, or I'm part of a hub in some cases. And then offline, I've got my own, I've got a women's connection group where I bring women together each month, every month. They're part of my group, my tribe, my peeps. And then every month or two, I just give community workshops and I give value to the community. And that just puts me at the center of the hub. And I think those are things that are working. What's interesting is we're having our conversation. Right before we started the show, somebody called me and they said, so-and-so told me that you're the only person who could help with my problem. And I said, I don't know, what's your problem? And it's perfect. I mean, absolute perfect referral, exactly spot on, ideal person, great personality, somebody I'm excited to help. And I love when business works that way instead of what I see people doing, which is hunting and constantly looking for anyone who's breathing to buy their products and services.
Yeah, it's funny. When I start my workshops, I just say, so I'm about to, because I talk about, there's this goal of getting the sale on there. There is another agenda and it works better. And I'm going to say it as 4 words. You are going to be immediately unimpressed and underwhelmed. And I'm going to spend the rest of the day making the case that this is something you should be whelmed by. Because it's this question that all the marketing goes around of, is it a fit? Mm-hmm. And I say, I get why that doesn't sound like much, because you don't understand the amount of work that goes into establishing what a perfect fit is. That's 90% of it. That's the heavy lifting. Once you've figured out the perfect fit, then it's easy. Then you just figure out the hubs, and then it's not no work, but it's simple.
It is. And for me, it makes it fun. You were asking me before, what didn't I like? A lot of things just didn't come natural to me. They were less than fun. I would force myself to do them, sometimes force myself to say them because, well, I have to ask for the sale and somebody told me to say this, even though it's not what I'd normally say. And I noticed my persona would change. I would be with somebody and friendly and engaged, and all of a sudden, I'm supposed to ask for the sale, and be a different personality. So I think when we find our way of doing it that comes from a very authentic place, marketing can be actually a lot easier than people think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so much of it is about vibe. One of the books I'm working on is all of it about this idea of vibe and marketing. And, Stuart Wilde, he wrote this book called Inner Power, and in it, he just talked about, he's like, whenever we meet people, we're silently voting yes or no, energetically with people. And I think it's just so true. And one of the things that will ironically have people vote no is when we're trying to get them to say yes. It's when people feel pressure. There's a fellow, Ari Galper, who has a business called Unlock the Game. And it's the first thing I came across that made sense to me in sales, because his whole orientation was the reason that sales conversations get so weird is because there's this agenda to get people to say yes, which creates the sales pressure. As soon as in our language or in our mindset, we're trying to steer people, it creates the sales pressure. And in fact, because of the reputation that salespeople and merchants have, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. So it's not new. It's so deeply ingrained that even if somebody perceives you as a salesperson, their sales pressure is likely to appear in them, even if you're not pressuring them. So his understanding was, your primary job as a salesperson, it's not to learn how to overcome objections. but it's to understand that the objections are occurring because of the sales pressure. So actually the primary skill of sales is identifying pressure and diffusing it. Which could just sound like, hey, I'm really not trying to sell you here. I'm just trying to figure out if this is a fit. And if it's not, I'm happy to refer you to somebody else. Constantly acknowledging and diffusing it so that people are free to make whatever choice they make. And which ironically is more, they're more likely to say yes. Like one of the exercises I do in workshops, I'll have people put their hands above their head, put them together. And I'll say, push as hard as you can with your right hand. And I'll say, I didn't say push back with your left. It's like, you really don't have to push back with your left. And it's like, so the message is when you push, people are going to push back, even if it's you.
Right.
And I literally never told you to push back. And I told you twice, you don't have to. And yet still that left hand was not going to give in. And that's the dynamic that happens in sales a lot. And so if we can actually just get rid of that, it's this shift from a pitch into a conversation. And then it's just like, you can just be like, so yeah, here's my program. I think this might be able to help you a lot. I don't know. Let me give you the rundown on it. You can tell me what you think, any questions, and then we can talk money if it feels like a fit, and work something out. But then people, there's no objections. Objections don't appear. It's just a conversation because they're like, well, what about this? And I'm a little concerned, but I don't know if this would,
That's what I love. I remember a long time ago, I owned an art business. And the first time I showed anybody the art, I didn't say anything. I just showed the art, right? And so then they said to me, we need to ask people, would you like it? And so I'd show the art and then I'd say, would you like it? And they would sometimes get quiet and I wouldn't know what to say. And so they gave me all these closes and would teach you these closes. So I had this one art show and I sold a lot of paintings. And I came home and I said, I think people are going to cancel. And my husband said, why? And I said, because I think I wore them down. Every objection, I knew something to say, and I don't think they wanted the art. And so sure enough, I got a lot of cancellations, and I just spoke to people when they canceled. And I said, did I pressure you into buying it? And they were like, yes. And I'm like, this is good for me to know. And then after that, I stopped with all the closes. I simply would show the art and say, if there's something you want to go with, I'm happy to help you. And if not, I'm really glad you came. And my sales started to skyrocket. Now I felt good and people were happy. And to me, it was just like, hey, would you like this? And if so, let me see if I can help you. And if it wasn't a fit, I really was fine with them not buying. I didn't want them to buy.
This is the thing that does not get seen in this industry, because people get up there and teach all these hard closes and high pressure tactics. And what people will see, you're sitting in a big seminar room and there's hundreds of people. And you see people standing up and running to the back with their credit cards to sign up. And you're doing the math in your head. You're counting. You're like, this is $1 million for them. A business of people signing up for stuff. And so it seems very impressive. But what people don't see is just what you talked about. The next day, the refunds, the cancellations. The people in the program who are kind of grumpy about being there, who drop out, who even though they paid $10,000, never show up to the second part of, we don't see that. And so it gets framed as, well, this is more effective. But again, more effective at what? And this whole approach you're talking about of like not pressuring, but just like, yeah, how can I help? And because then it's more solid. And what's funny is, so let's say, yeah, you have an art gallery and you're like, oh, hey, we're not selling as much art. One approach is we've obviously got to apply more pressure to the people who are looking. That's one approach. Another approach would be, okay, well, first of all, do we have a niche as an art gallery? Do we actually have a thing? Do we have a vibe, an aesthetic that we kind of really have consistently? And if not, okay, well, let's get one. But then even if you get one, that's like, okay, where would people who would be into this kind of art hang out? How can we get more of those people here? Because those are the people that are just more likely to buy the art anyways. How do we find the people who are a perfect fit? I mean, you put the effort there so that you don't have to apply the pressure versus we have a random art gallery that doesn't have a real clear aesthetic and we're getting random people coming because of that. Now we're trying to pressure them. It just doesn't work. It's not as effective. If the stuff that I'd learned when I started, which was very similar, I went through very similar situations as you. If that had worked, I'd still be doing it.
Exactly.
Even if it wasn't high integrity, I probably would have been like, well, it works, but it didn't work. and it felt gross to people, and it weirded out relationships. And so it's like, okay, so this isn't even effective. I had one woman come to a workshop in Vancouver, and she came to me. She was in some multi-level thing, and the whole day she was like sword fighting with me because she was like, basically was saying to me, I'm a single mom. I got 2 kids. What I'm doing works at some level. I am getting clients. So if your hippie shit doesn't work better than mine, I'm not interested. I don't care. And so she would come at me, she's like, well, what about this? And I would ching, ching, shing, and I'd take the sword out of her hand, and she would look at me with this kind of like, but then she said, but what about this? And she'd come at me again. And by the end of the workshop, it's like she didn't have any more moves, but she needed to try every move on me.
Interesting.
Because she needed to see that I had something better. And by the end, she was crying because she was realizing she never had to do that stuff again, that she'd been taught, that there was actually another way that felt better for her, would feel better for them, but was also more effective, because this is the heart of it. Most people feel like it's a choice. I either do something that feels good or I do something that's effective. And, if you don't have to worry about money, you're going to choose what feels good. But if money is the thing, you got a family, you're going to choose what works. But it's a false binary. It's not that way.
Totally. I cannot believe we're running out of time. I could sit here with you on the show for hours. I have to just say, I definitely oscillate with so much of what you have to say. You've created so much value. So I want to thank you for being my guest here today on Terry TV. Deeply appreciate you and your wisdom.
Thanks for having me.